Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of the main stories affecting the Sikh community around the world. And as India threatens Pakistan yet again, it appears India has been quietly supporting terrorist organisations inside Pakistan. Is it a case of the pot calling the kettle black? Well, in this context, we'll take a look at two key potential trigger points between those two nations that immediately justify the existence of Khalistan to solve them overnight to avoid what could potentially become one day a nuclear Armageddon. Well, all this and more on today's show, but joining me as always is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and I hope you're doing well on that side of the pond, as I hope all of our viewers are doing well. Once again, don't forget to stick around to the end of this show to see if your comments make it on the air. But throughout the show tonight, we'll announce a lucky winner that's going to get one of the much coveted True Crime and Justice TV cups, because we don't have any Satledge ones yet, but we're getting there. We will get them, and we'll use those for giveaways in the future. And don't forget, you see this phone line sitting here? That is because we're soon going to be going live, and we'll be able to take your phone calls throughout the show, so you don't even have to type it in. You can just call us direct. We'll be looking forward to that, and we'll keep you posted as we get closer to that launch date. But other than that, Angus, back to you in London.
Indeed, and James and I together. In the meantime, we'll be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we'll take a look at loads of great comments which have been filling up below the videos at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Okay, Angus, pick me a number between 1 and 25.
Oh, I'll take a 17 on that one.
A 17. Okay, so on our screen, if we share the screen there, you'll see the comments on our comment page here. And we are, it's not sharing that screen, but that's okay. We're going to go through and we're going to take number 17 and we'll send you a message. And with that, we'll ask you to send us an email with your address so we can send you out one of these coffee mugs. And we'll get that out to you in the mail, regardless as to where you are. We can ship it anywhere in the world. So we have the technology. So congratulations, and we will send you a message to number 17 on the list in our comments from last night. So excellent. Now, let's move on with the show, as they say. The big news for a lot of Indians is that now the U.S. Green Card Lottery has seen its maximum. How this works essentially is that the U.S. wants to balance out the nations in which they accept different claims for green cards. So, for example, the countries with the highest numbers in the tens of thousands would be India, Canada, China, Korea. There's certain countries now that have used up those areas, and they're shifting now to try and balance out the countries in which the other visas are going to go to for this year, or the green cards for this year and next. However, because of the large number of visa holders from India, it looks as though they won't be eligible for this green card lottery until at least 2028. So that's going to have a lot of impact on individuals. The other options will still remain open, which are things such as the H-1B visas, as well as the investment-based immigration and asylum, or applying through family sponsorship. So those are areas in which you'll still be able to apply, but the visa lottery has been shut down for India. And again, there's other countries as well. China, even Canada, surprisingly, is part of that program. But I guess not surprisingly, because, you know, they can only handle so much maple syrup there in the U.S. So that's of significance. So again, if you were looking to be involved in trying to obtain your citizenship or your green card through that lottery, again, you won't be qualified from India until 2028. This is a very interesting matter, though, because what has happened in Canada when we reduced the numbers last year, which took effect not only in 2025, but over the next several years, we have reduced numbers. So what's happened is that we've seen a huge influx of individuals who had been here on student visas, on work visas, temporary worker visas, all these different types. Now, all of a sudden, we've had a major jump by over 100% of applications for asylum. So with this, the government has caught on to this play, saying, no, no, no. You had absolutely no claims of security or safety risks when you arrived in the country, when you were looking at applying to this program after school was finished to remain in the country. Now you're claiming asylum. So, we got to at least give the government credit that they caught that one before it happened, as opposed to 10 years from now when they're scratching their heads going, what did we do wrong? With that, of course, the U.S. is cutting down on the number of immigrants that they are allowing in from all nations as well. And those numbers could impact the H-1Bs, that could impact the family sponsorship programs. So again, if you are looking or contemplating any of these other avenues, it would be suggested that you get your applications in fairly quick before any more changes and reductions are made to the programs. So just something of interest to those who are concerned about that. Now, as we move on here, we are taking a look at an individual who was a consultant for the U.S. government. Now, for some reason, he was listed as an unpaid consultant and advisor to George W. Bush and to other White House staff and administrations. However, what makes it news now is that Mr. Tellis's Vienna home has turned up thousands of pages of documents that have been marked top secret and secret files. This is very concerning because it has to do with the technology and abilities of certain government assets, including aircraft and other important or high tech, potentially military technology or otherwise. This investigation is ongoing. However, the charges have been laid within the U.S. District Court. I believe that was the District of Virginia. And at this point, the individual, Ashley Tellis, is claiming that he will be steadfastly denying these charges and he will fight every step of the way to prove his innocence. This is very interesting because they also have claimed, and when I say they, the FBI, has stated that he was unpaid as an advisor and a contractor with the Pentagon. Well, I don't know how you can be a contractor and not be paid, but at the same time, I think it's just the wording of this article. However, as I was about to say, though, one of the very interesting facts about this, Angus, is that it was not the India government he was alleged to be sharing these secrets with. It was actually China. So it's reported that they had him under a surveillance. He went to several meetings with Chinese nationals, and he had manila envelopes in which, when he came out of those meetings, he no longer had those manila envelopes. So the question is, has he actually been trading these secrets with China for financial considerations or anything else? And that is a big concern, given the level of security and access that he had to a lot of the top secret Pentagon papers. Once again, he is vigorously contesting the allegations, and he is saying that he is fighting any claims, especially the insinuations of him operating on behalf of a foreign adversary, which in this case, again, was China. And it just appears that they have found a big leak. And I guess what's really concerning to the Trump administration is that they weren't held up in a bathroom. So, the documents at Mar-a-Lago were a big concern, but now they found a contractor who really should have no hands or eyes on these outside of his legal purview in the Pentagon. Why he's got these papers, and if it is true, then he could face 10 years in prison, which is the maximum sentence, plus a fine of $250,000. But we'll have to watch and see how that plays out. So again, very interesting, but also very concerning that someone has that ability and is potentially trading with China, especially in this day and age when so much attention is being put on the international cooperative agreements with India, with other nations, to try and hold China off as a major threat in today's modern society. Now, moving on, a keynote address by Udav Kotak says that India's wealth is he is India's wealthiest banker, and he says that in investing in companies and looking to gain any type of leverage over the U.S. when it comes to tariff battles, India is really shy on. They don't have the leverage that they would like, and they don't have any leverage that really could be significant to sway the U.S. Department of Trade or economic development in that manner. He's very interesting going on talking about how the different brands that are built outside of the country of India have a lot more significant power. And when we look at that, he's talking about companies like Nvidia, IBM, Microsoft, even Netflix. And essentially, when you have that brand control and that brand recognition, it not only gives you some leverage because these are companies and brands that all people can associate with worldwide that use them. We use Netflix on a regular basis, so we can associate that brand with that country and with negotiations. That would be in terms of the technology taxes and the media taxes. When we look at NVIDIA, so you're looking at chips, you're looking at technology, you're not only looking at the physical products, but you're also looking at AI generation and development down the road. So again, this is a very tangible company that has extrinsic value in not only the current process, but for future generations. And that's where he's talking about it, is not just in the modern day, but in terms of the future development, the future valuations, and the generational representation that it'll have for future generations. When we look at companies like Apple, again, it is one that will stand the test of time. It is one that hopefully will be there generations to come as a major U.S. corporation. India does not have companies with that international brand recognition, and that's what he's talking about when he spoke to this keynote address to other wealthy individuals within India. So he's also talking about, as people are building companies now, they're not actually considering or having that forward thought of the brand recognition and how that could actually be leverage within negotiating powers, not only with the US in today's day and age of tariffs and uncertainties, but also moving forward to negotiate maybe with China or with Russia, with any other country, Canada or the US or Mexico. And that is what the message comes down to, is building recognizable brands so that when the tariffs do hit, people can sit back and, in this case, the tariffs, for example, on the iPhones. People in America use iPhones. It is an American brand, but it's a recognized brand. And people were screaming that, hold on, we don't want our iPhones to triple in price. Now, the same thing happens with international companies. And a prime example here could be TikTok. This is a Chinese-based company. The U.S. wants to bring that under control of U.S. investors. But at the same time, people screamed when the U.S. wanted to shut TikTok down and eliminate it from the U.S. platform availability. This has power in Washington. And that is what it's all about. It's about getting that brand power, that leverage, and trying to move forward to build a long-term sustainable economy and brand recognition. He also goes on to talk about the goal of India to be able to be recognized as one of the major economic powerhouses in the world. And again, is very clear that that is an important step that is required to continue down that road of international, I would say almost dominance when it comes to economic development, Angus.
Yeah, this is actually I find a fascinating story because India has a systemic flaw in its economic model, let's say, and it's primarily, again, it's back down to the BJP. And we've covered this in the past, actually, some time ago, when we sort of analysed the Indian economy and what is holding it back. And one of the key things holding it back is there is this, sadly, again, it comes back down to this sort of almost the caste system that's been imposed on the economic structure, in that the upper caste, effectively the ruling elite, are trying to make it as hard as possible for anybody lower down that pyramid of that caste system to basically succeed. And of course, by doing that, the middle class in India is being held back, and it's the middle class primarily, and then to a certain extent the working class beneath that. That is the entrepreneurial engine. It is India has a huge amount of very intelligent, very commercially aware, very productive people. You know, there's a lot of expertise in India, not least because the West has exported, has outsourced a lot of its IT activity, for example, its technology, to India because it was cheaper to manufacture, produce, create, code, whatever in India. And of course, so that means India has a really, really well-educated, well-experienced workforce in many, many specifically modern industries. But what's happening with that expertise? It's being exploited. It's not being encouraged to be entrepreneurial, to create, to grow its own companies. Again, it's the sort of the billionaires are ensuring that they maintain control. But it's the future Apples, it's the future Microsofts, it's the future Googles, the future Amazons that could be somewhere there in India that are being held down because the young men or women who would otherwise be creating this are being kept down by that systemic flaw in their system. And that's the problem. So this is why I think India has a brand problem. It doesn't have these big brands like many Western nations, particularly the US does, because it is it's disincentivizing entrepreneurship. And many global economists have recognised this as being a problem with India. And ultimately, the buck stops with the BJP government. It's the BJP government that is ensuring, that is perpetuating this systemic problem. So, it doesn't surprise me that. And of course, compare that to China. Now, China has a very different model. China is a lot more authoritarian. We often say that India's jumping to bed with China. It certainly seems to be the case. But China China has a massively fast-growing middle class. It has a huge amount of entrepreneurship. Again, China mirrors India in many ways. It has a lot of expertise internally. And China encourages entrepreneurship. But also there's a dark side to that in that the Chinese state always ensures it has a stake in any private enterprise. So there is always still a lot of state control, but it encourages private enterprise. And that's why China's economy is so much larger than the Indian economy, despite having the same pretty much the same populations. So that's a huge contrast between India and China. And it's to India's loss. And India is still going to struggle to become a future economic superpower unless it changes its ways. It needs to encourage its local entrepreneurs. It needs to encourage its youth to get out there and build businesses because they are the future brands of India. And that's where India is failing. Now, I'm going to jump back to the other story you talked about, James. And I find this very concerning. The one about this guy, what's his name? Ashley Tellis, this advisor, this contractor. Now, it appears on the face of it, allegedly, he has been selling secrets. He's been selling Pentagon document secrets to a foreign power. At first, I thought, India, it's surprising it could have been India. But when do we find it's China? Well, this is a familiar story, isn't it? China, we do know, is a massive threat to the Western world. It is a growing threat. China has a very, very active spying program. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. Every nation has spying programs. The West has them just as much as the East do. But China has been very, very active, certainly in a very, very shrewd manner in terms of obtaining secrets, obtaining IP, that's intellectual property, commercial intellectual property, and obtaining state secrets. And it does this through various methods, through the traditional spying methods. But what it has been very clever at is seducing through money, incentivizing foreigners in the West to pass secrets, usually through money. And I've seen this firsthand, actually. What they tend to do is they will find academics. They will identify, and this guy, and actually he was described as a widely respected scholar. Yeah, so what? This is what China does. It pays widely respected scholars. I know one specifically, and I'm not going to name him, who's been a victim of this, let's say. And they pay them large amounts of money, and they spend some time in China, and they will do a tour of universities, and they will pass on their expertise, their knowledge to students, but likewise to fellow academics. And through being paid large amounts of money, they are essentially, China is ending up buying expertise and buying Western knowledge. And of course, that's a perfectly legal way. But the problem comes is that China has already been identified as a threat. China is a future threat. We should not be selling our secrets and our expertise and our knowledge to China. And there are all sorts of restrictions in place to stop this happening. But China bypasses a lot of these restrictions by simply paying academics, these highly respected scholars, to essentially come and teach us, come and give you secrets legally. There's nothing wrong with that. So when we find that this guy actually tell us, his defenders are saying, well, he's a widely respected scholar. It's meaningless. This is what China does. And it does appear that it's quite likely, allegedly, he has been passing Pentagon secrets. Now, that clearly is, there is no legality about that. If he's passing state secrets to China, well, there you go. That's to me, it's a pretty open and shut case. But again, this is part of the threat that China is now posing. China, as I said, has been really active in trying to recruit people right across the West through academia, in industry, and now in politics to pass secrets. Now, we have, and this is particularly pertinent to what's going on here in the UK. Surrender Starmer. Yes, once again, we have to sadly go back to Surrender Starmer. Surrender Starmer now, we have a scandal that's quietly brewing. Is that, and I'll give you the quick details of this case. We have two British state officials who are about to go to trial accused of passing secrets to China. Exactly the same scenario. Now, that case suddenly collapsed just as it was about to go to court. The case collapsed. Why? Because a legal technicality. The prosecution service needed to present in court the simple fact that China is a threat, and therefore these people have been passing secrets to a threat, to a state that is a threat. Unfortunately, they needed the government to confirm legally that China is a threat. At the 11th hour, Starmer's government didn't provide. They said, no, we're not providing it. And everybody said, well, of course China's a threat. All it takes is the government to officially state it. And Starmer says, no, not us. We're not going to do it. Why? Because, well, we want to be friends with China. Well, basically, China has got to the British government. China basically has so many people on its payroll in our civil service and in our political class that our political class have actually now said China is no longer a threat. This is despite the fact that our intelligence services, MI5 and MI6, even in recent days have come out publicly to state China is a threat. We have a real and present danger with Chinese activities. They are stealing our secrets. They are potentially a future threat. There is no ambiguity here. China is a black and white threat to our interests here in the UK and likewise, of course, to Canada and North America. But and to set out the problem that we now have is even our own Prime Minister and his government have now come out publicly and said China is no threat. This case has collapsed. So two spies for China, they are now will not face trial because technically, legally, we have not said that China is a threat. It's an absolute national embarrassment. It is making the United Kingdom a laughingstock on the world stage. And I've said this so many times before. All those nations outside internationally are laughing at the UK. They're all lining up, and I referred to a cartoon that somebody done recently, where all the global leaders are all queuing up saying, oh, can we be next to negotiate with Surrender Starmer? Because he just gives us everything. Everything we ask for, he gives us. And this is true. And this China case is another prime example. China is laughing at Great Britain. No, I'm not going to call it Great Britain anymore. Former Great Britain. Because we are being led by a guy who is on his knees surrendering and offering up everything, including our state secrets, to a foreign power that is an enemy of the United Kingdom. So, James, unfortunately, that is what we face here in the UK. But clearly this guy, I think, under the Trump administration is going to find a very, very different attitude.
Absolutely. And I always find it amusing, Angus, is that people going, no, it's just a professor, it's a scholar, it's this. Well, of course it is. Their government is not going to recruit your gardener to find out the secrets of your Husqvarna chainsaw. They're not going to, bring in your plumber. They're not going to call in your chef. Of course, they're academics. Of course, they're people in a position that won't be questioned when they are in a foreign nation. and allegedly for, teaching and, educating or for research. These, of course, these are who they're targeting. So the people that sit there and say, oh, no, I would never believe it. He's such a great, professor. Come on, give your head a shake. It's obvious that's who they're going to target. They don't want to know how your barista, Starbucks is making your coffee. That's not relevant to them. So again, it's just, the silliness in terms of those who defend it just based on the fact that they're scholars. And yeah, you're absolutely right that it is a major concern, especially in this day and age. And the last thing I wanted to point out to that, Angus, is the reality that it is ongoing. And all of these countries, Canada, the US, the UK, they're scared to really rock the boat when it comes to China. And I laugh because China knows what they're up to. It's not going to offend them. It's, they know what they're doing and they expect to be called out on it. But instead, everybody has tried to, handle them with kid gloves.
The Chinese are very clever. They've always been very good at negotiating, and they're playing a very, very great game. Unfortunately, we are led by fools here in the West. It just seems to be the Western weakness is that for some reason we keep electing, and maybe this is a failure of the democratic system, we keep electing these fools who basically sell us out at the first opportunity. It's money. Money, unfortunately, sadly, is the greatest incentive for human beings. It is the human being's greatest weakness, isn't it? And the Chinese know that, so we'll pay these guys enough money. Yeah, and people look after their own selfish interests, and in the process, they go and sell out their own states as part of that. So, sadly, anyway,
like I've said before, Angus, those that are really the ones that are ideal that we would love to have in office, that are with ethics, that have the brain power, and of course the honesty as well as brilliance. Those are the people that are smart enough and have the ethics to stay the hell away from politics, unfortunately. Those are the ones we want.
Indeed, yeah, and that's the great irony of human nature, isn't it? Is that those who end up leading us are those probably the least best people to lead us. So anyway, let's move on as we analyse human nature once more. Now let's talk about India, Pakistan. This is one of our favourite topics. So these two old enemies, these two nations that just cannot resolve their differences and likely never will. Once again we had the terrible Pahalgam attacks back in April. And this was, of course, a time when India accused Pakistan of harbouring terrorists who undertook allegedly this terrible attack in Kashmir that I think was about 30 odd people were massacred and under a hail of gunfire. Well, it turns out that India has actually. I said in the introduction this English phrase. It's the pot calling the kettle black. In other words, it's a deep state of hypocrisy coming from India, and it turns out that obviously there's been a lot of behind the scenes activity between India and Pakistan. Is that India often accused Pakistan of harbouring terrorists that then move into India and cause problems with India, particularly in the Kashmir region. Well, it turns out India has actually been interfering in the internal affairs of Pakistan and pretty much doing basically the same thing. And just a few days ago, there was an incident that has actually even hit the Western headlines. I'm going to go through. This is a Daily Telegraph article that covered it, and it was a fairly low-level issue, but it was significant enough that it did actually hit just one or two Western news outlets. And this was a case of an intelligence raid that Pakistan undertook in one of its northern provinces against a terrorist group, and they're accusing Delhi. They're accusing India of backing and supporting this terrorist group that is operating inside Pakistan. So, as the report says, the Pakistan actually warned India, look, you're potentially now driving us towards a new war after this incident. And in this incident, 11 Pakistan soldiers were killed, including 2 officers, during this intelligence raid against this terrorist group that is now accusing India of backing. Now, Pakistan's Defence Minister, Khawaja Asif, he said, look, the chances of war with India are real. They are growing. After this incident that happened in the northwestern Orakzai district, and which, as I said, 11 Pakistan soldiers were killed. And the military said they launched this incident against Tariq-e-Taliban, TTP, which is essentially, they call it the Pakistan Taliban. So again, it's got links to extremists over in Afghanistan. And we do know that India has long historic ties with the predecessors of the Taliban in Afghanistan. So unsurprisingly, these links to the Pakistan Taliban, that the TTP are widely known in the local intelligence services around that region. Now, Pakistan authorities have long accused Delhi of supporting the Taliban fighters within India, as well as separatist movements in Balochistan. I'm going to talk about that in a moment in more detail. The Pakistan minister claimed that Pakistan now has more supporters and allies than it had 6 months ago in the international community, while accusing India of losing international goodwill after the May fighting. That was after that Pahalgam attack. That's quite an interesting statement, and it's actually probably true now, is that the global community is starting to wake up a little bit more to the local politics between India and Pakistan. India, as we've referred to recently, India is losing credibility. India has been known to launch false flag attacks. And again, the Western community and the global community are starting to wake up to this fact. And ironically, Pakistan, which traditionally has been accused of harbouring Islamic extremists, particularly the likes of these Islamist extremists that have been operating in Afghanistan over recent years, is that Pakistan actually now is having improved relations with the West, so much so that the West actually now is starting to side a lot more, even publicly now, with Pakistan against India. And Pakistan, of course, unsurprisingly, are leveraging this point, as Asif has just proclaimed publicly now. So the Pakistani Army's media wing, Inter-Services Public Relations, ISPR, said its top commanders met recently in Rawalpindi to review the situation, warned India any imaginary new normal that India was trying to claim would be met with what they claim is a new normal of swift retributive response. In other words, you try it again, India, we're not going to sit back. We are going to fight back a little bit more violently now. So the statement described recent comments by Indian political and military leaders as provocative and irresponsible, accusing them of whipping up war hysteria for political gain. Yes, and again, after the Pahalgam attacks, there were these accusations levelled against India saying, look, this is all about this nationalist extremist movement. It's Hindutva, basically. It's trying to whip up support, as Modi's support has actually been declining, as evidenced by the elections last year, is that he's still trying to whip up this nationalist sentiment. He's whipping up the Hindu majority and saying, look, we're all Hindus, we're all Indians together. And all he's doing is actually whipping up tensions, particularly with Pakistan. It's an old political tactic. If you as a leader and as a government are losing support, the quickest way to get it back, to rally people behind you, is to find an enemy, even create artificially a common enemy, so that people, again, human nature, tend to unite behind the leader, however bad that leader is, to fight against that external threat. And that is basically what India have been doing with Pakistan, particularly after the Pahalgam attack. And that may be the root behind the accusations that it potentially was a false flag, to try and, again, shore up support of the BJP government. So the head of the Indian Army warned Pakistan at the time to end state-sponsored terrorism or risk losing its place on the map. Next time, India will not exercise the restraint shown during Operation Sindoor 1.0, referring to the May offensive. So India, at the time and since, has been quite aggressive and quite robust in its language. Now, post the Pahalgam attack, Pakistan interestingly nominated Donald Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, claiming that actually Donald Trump was behind the climb down, the de-escalation of what potentially was going to be quite a nasty conflict between the two nations. But tensions have remained high ever since. Rajnath Singh, India's defence minister, warned Pakistan against any aggression in the Sur Creek area. And again, I'm going to talk about that in a moment, saying such an act will change both history and geography. So, as both sides trade threats, analysts warn that a new conflict could spiral faster than previous ones, especially as nationalist fervour rises in both capitals. Pakistan's recent mutual defence pact with Saudi Arabia, this is interesting, James, of course, you touched on that recently, under which an attack on one would be treated as an attack on both, has added another layer of complexity to the region's fragile balance. Very interesting, this, because, of course, Pakistan has now got this mutual support agreement with Saudi Arabia. Saudi, in turn, also is very allied to Western nations, particularly the United Kingdom. So again, you can see how Pakistan is reaching out and creating this complex web of geopolitical support, primarily based around the Western alliances, where India, likewise and conversely, is building its network of alliances, but with the Russia, the China, the North Korea, the Belaruses. So you can start to see how these two nations are pulling apart into different East versus West components. So again, quite concerning really when we're still trying to get India on side, and there are those who still believe we can get India alongside. But look at the facts on the ground. Unfortunately, the trend line at the moment is that Pakistan's moving our way, India's moving Russia, China's way, which is quite concerning. So now two areas, and I just want to quickly just touch on these two particular areas, these two trigger points, as we call them. These are triggers that potentially are areas of conflict between India and Pakistan. They are linked to what we've just been talking about. Now, we're talking about, first of all, let me just flip to the other story here. Right, so I mentioned there in that, or the Daily Telegraph article touched upon the Balochistan situation. Balochistan is this area in southwestern Pakistan. You can see the border here. That's Pakistan there. Balochistan is that shaded area there. Now, Balochistan has actually had this separatist movement that's been going on for quite some time. But Pakistan is and has been accusing India of stoking the Balochi Liberation Army, of stoking these secessionist movements. Now, you think of the irony and the hypocrisy here, where India has been so hard on any secessionist movement within its own boundaries, particularly the Khalistan movement, Tamil Nadu, we've had the Kashmiris, etc. All these secessionist movements that have been there for many, many years in India, basically since partition. And India has been brutal to the point of actual sending in the army and physical violence against any separatist movement. Well, it's trying to encourage these very same types of movements in Pakistan. Clearly, it's up to some dirty tricks in Pakistan. So Pakistan's been quite vocal, saying, look, you've got to stop supporting this separatist movement in Balochistan, because again, it is actually upsetting the boundary integrity of Pakistan. Now, the BLA, which is the Balochistan Liberation Army, itself has actually been designated formally and legally as a terrorist organisation, not just by Pakistan, but by the West, the UK, the Five Eyes nations, the US, and it's been going since, it's been particularly active since 2000. It's conducted numerous deadly attacks on Pakistan military troops, police, journalists, civilians, and educational institutions. So it really is. It is a known terrorist organisation. And here we go. This is India, supposedly all white and clean, and saying, look, don't look at us, gov. We're a law-abiding democratic nation. Well, it turns out that India has actually been supporting this known terrorist organisation, both in Balochistan and certainly up in the northwestern provinces as well. So the other area that is this potential trigger point, I just want to have a quick rundown to educate our audience for those who may not know about the Sur Creek area. This is, again, it's a relatively small thing, but it has caused a huge amount of tension. And again, it is one of these hugely potential trigger points between India and Pakistan that could, again, lead on to a more concerning situation between the two nations. And that is the area of Sur Creek. Now, what is Sur Creek? It's a funnily named little place. Now, after partition in 1947, the British drew this pretty arbitrary line between Pakistan and India. And as you can see from the map here, that is the international boundary between India and Pakistan. Now, all well and good. It's all pretty clearly delineated. It obviously was very controversial at the time, but it's very clearly delineated, except for one little area. And that is this little area on the coast, just down here, this tiny little area. This is an area of estuaries. It's a very complex geographical area. And it looks like that. Basically, it's mud flats, estuaries. It's a maritime area. And again, it's just this little area here of lots of tiny little estuaries. And this is where the boundary between India and Pakistan is ambiguous. And they still cannot settle where the actual boundary line goes. So what is it specifically? It is this 96-kilometre long tidal estuary located between the two across this area. As you say, it's marshy mud flats. It's a pretty uninhabitable, pretty unpleasant part of the world, to be honest. There's actually not a lot you can do with it. It literally is just marshland. and it flows between Gujarat, which is the southern area. So Gujarat, that's the home state of Modi and Amit Shah, and Sindh province, which is this area over in Pakistan. And it flows into the Arabian Sea, this geopolitically crucial sea separating the two nations. Now, why is it important? So, this creek, and here again, this is a zoom in of that creek area. Now, the dispute basically is where specifically this line between the two nations lie. Again, it seems the most sort of weird little argument. And what's more weird about it is the two lines that they're arguing over literally is the red and the green. The red goes down the middle of the creek. The green goes down one side of the creek, one coast, one bank of that creek. So India are claiming it's down the middle of the creek, the red line. Pakistan are arguing, no, it's along the bank. Which again, it's so seemingly to us insignificant. So why on earth does it matter? Well, it matters because economics. It's good old economics. Now, it holds very little military value. I mean, again, you can see practically, logistically on the ground, it's a little stretch of water, whether it's from the bank or in the middle of the creek, it doesn't almost matter militarily. What does matter is when you start looking at what are called economic zones. And these are the EEZs, the exclusive economic zones, because under international maritime law, every nation that has a coast can then draw an imaginary line 12 miles beyond their boundary out to sea, and they have the exclusive rights to everything within that area. It's EEZ as it's known. Now there is also another area up to what's called the continental shelf, and there's a 200-mile limit as well, but that's all the sort of the weird intricacies of maritime law. But ultimately, the really important part is certainly the first 12 miles, the exclusive economic zone. So each nation then has the sole rights to the mineral rights, particularly, of course, to extract anything or control anything within that 12-mile zone of their EEZ. Now, of course, every mile, every kilometre matters in that, because particularly it is known that there are potentially areas of oil and gas out just off this coast. So of course, again, every mile that they're arguing could be another reservoir, could be hundreds of millions of barrels of oil or gas or whatever thing is of gas. So again, there's a hugely important economic argument, because, as I say, every metre matters in these sorts of things. There's also a lot of dispute about local fisheries, and each side has been accusing each other of withholding fishermen against their wills, etc., when they stray into each other's disputed land. And then, of course, we come back to water, and another factor is that Pakistan's LBOD canal, which discharges water, that's both saline, salty water, and industrial water, that flows into Sur Creek itself. And India sees this as a violation of that good old Indus Waters treaty that was signed some decades ago. So again, there is another interest, particularly on Pakistan's side, to keep the dispute unresolved so they can keep on doing this. So that's what's really important about this. So again, this sort of article talks more about the sort of the growing tensions of it. But ultimately, these two areas, firstly, we have Balochistan and the separatist movement, which in itself is actually quite small, but it's an irritation to Pakistan. Pakistan is having to send in its troops to fight this secessionist movement, but they are losing people. Lives are being lost over this sort of relatively minor irritation for Pakistan. But more importantly, it is being backed clearly by the Indian state. The level of hypocrisy there is enormous, particularly when we look at the Pahalgam attacks. So that's one potential trigger point that is just growing, will not go away. And secondly, we have the Sur Creek area, which has just been bubbling on basically since partition. And again, each side, and particularly India, has argued that you start imposing on our Sur Creek area and we'll start getting a little bit more violent. So again, you can see why this, again, is a potential trigger point. So back to why we're talking all about this. Both these areas, both these trigger points can be solved overnight by the establishment of Khalistan. Yes, once again, it's back to the permanent solution. There is one obvious solution staring both nations in the face, And of course, staring the international community in the face, because the international community, likewise, are trying everything in their power, diplomatically and economically, and using every leverage that that the global community has against both these nations to stop them coming to blows. This is why Donald Trump even waded in recently to try and calm these tensions between these two powers. They are two nuclear-armed powers who've already gone to war at least once, and probably twice, actually, over their differences. And these differences are ideologically poles apart. They will never come to agreement. There will never be peace between India and Pakistan until something divides them. And I often refer to North and South Korea. North and South Korea had a buffer zone installed between those two nations for this very reason, to keep those two warring factions apart. India and Pakistan need a buffer zone. The only permanent solution to stopping these trigger points escalating into full-scale war and, God forbid, a nuclear war between these two nations is a buffer zone. That buffer zone, as we often always refer to, has to be Khalistan. The map of Khalistan has been drawn out. We have shown it in our podcasts, in our shows regularly, James, that the establishment of Khalistan is the only permanent solution to stop these trigger points becoming something a lot worse. That whole Sir Creek area falls into Khalistan. Khalistan will control that whole estuary, that marshland will become part of Khalistan. There is no argument. It becomes very clear. No ambiguity. India and Pakistan then have their own clearly delimited boundaries. There's no trigger point there. Khalistan controls that contentious area. They will look after it, and problem solved, James. It really is as simple as that.
It is, Angus, and let's not overlook how some nations are better off while the conflict continues or the disagreements and disputes continue, because right now they can both extract and exploit what's available to them off their coast of each side. If the border does indeed move to the shoreline, then of course that takes things in a different direction. So again, there is certain benefits and drawbacks to each side. Now, of course, we also look at the fact that Pakistan, as you said, has been really working to build up allies around the world. Now, so has, as you pointed out, India. But the differentiation there is that India is trying to play both sides of the fence. They are going towards building or continuing relations with China, with Russia, and so forth. But at the same time, they're trying to give themselves that image internationally of a superpower, of a developed nation, of one that can be trusted and relied upon by nations in the West, including the US and the UK and Canada. And what we've seen in the past when it comes to these nations that are neutral is that they're not building the relationships as India is, where it's playing both sides very clearly, and there is a threat or a distrust to a certain level. So again, that's the difference between historically neutral countries and what India is trying to do. And it's a big game of, you could say a long-term game of chess that they are trying to maneuver. But at the same time, there's only so many spaces on that chessboard before you fall off the edge and, and collapse your empire.
Indeed. As I often say, I mean, there will come a time when India is going to have to choose sides. You can't just play both sides off against each other forevermore. That unfortunately, it is going to have to pin its colours against one mast one day. So, anyway, James, let's move on now to our comments column. And as always, a big thank you to all our wonderful audience, our loyal audience who've been contributing massively. With loads of great comments, and we're going to start off today with, again, one of our regulars, actually, Mohan. And this is after the podcast I did with Dr. Graywell, and Dr. Graywell gave a fascinating presentation about the political history of the Sikh community, particularly obviously since 1947, and how it's tried to build a political voice and have its democratic voice heard in India against an overwhelming state that really did not want to hear that voice. So again, loads of comments came in after this video, and Mohan started off saying that the fake Saint Gandhi and the lying egotistical politician Nehru lied to the Sikhs to grab India's most valuable land. The Hindus are lying, parasitic thieves. Yes, unfortunately, James, once again, we all often refer to this great betrayal of 1947 when Nehru, Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, as Mohandas says, the fake Saint Gandhi, basically promised the Sikhs everything and delivered nothing.
And you know what's funny? Just as we look at that, he was actually 17 when I counted out while you were doing your story. So he's our lucky winner of a prize. So there you go. Talk about just coincidence that he was at the top of your list tonight for the comments.
How about that? Well, Mohandana, do
So
get
we'll
in touch.
reach out to him anyway.
Yeah, get in touch, Mohandana. Let us know your details. We'll get that mug out to you wherever you are. Let's hope you're not in Burkina Faso or somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Right. Anyway, let's continue with the comments. AS
Sorry, as you were saying.
Absolutely, no. So it's an interesting coincidence that. As AS Tier says, unless the Punjabi Hindus now realise the anti-Punjab policies of Hindu Sarkar, they too will suffer and lose anything. This is a key point that Dr. Grayall brought out in his presentation, is that even Hindus in the Punjab are starting to wake up to the fact that the Indian government is targeting not just the Sikhs, it's also destroying the state of Punjab. So if you're a Hindu in the Punjab, you likewise are suffering. In other words, this attack on the Sikhs, the collateral damage are even the Hindus in the Punjab. So even the Hindus in the Punjab need to wake up to this fact, James, is that they need to join forces with Punjabi Sikhs and fight back against this. And as I keep saying, Khalistan, once it's established, that will be open. Its borders will be open to Hindus. If you're a Hindu in Punjab, you will be extremely welcome in Khalistan, James.
Absolutely. And the beauty of Khalistan is that it's going to be, as you said, it's going to be open, it's going to be welcoming, it's going to be inviting. But it's also on that premise that it will build a huge tourism related industry while offering so much leadership in terms of that buffer zone and everything else, that people will be able to experience the life of Khalistan, but also be able to hopefully cross borders into India on one side, Pakistan on the other, and just really to bring the whole region into a better light.
Indeed. And Jagtar Sidhu actually nails it, hits the nail on the head perfectly, explaining who the real issue that we all have, the enemy to us all, including Hindus, are the Brahmins. It's all about the caste system, and reminds us very nicely, of course, of why Sikhi was established in the first place. It broke away. The first guru rejected the whole caste system, recognised the evil of the caste system for what it was. Guru Nanak Ji recognised for what it was, set up the Sikh religion, and likewise now. So even through to the 21st century, the Brahmins are the enemy of the Guru Granth Sahib Ji, of course, the Holy Scriptures, the continuing guru, and of course the holiest seat of Sikhi, the Akal Takht as well. So ultimately, as we often remind our audience, the real enemy, it's not the Hindu people, it's the Brahmins, it's the upper caste ruling elite, James.
Absolutely. And what I find very interesting about Sikhi is how it's transcended the generations, Angus, and how much the principles of Seva and all of these other principles that are foundational there really translate in today's modern world as well. Whereas certain other religions, I'm not going to name any individually because they all have their strengths and weaknesses, but I just like how it is all about humanity and helping to the betterment of each other. And I think, how can that ever get old? How can that ever be a negative?
Indeed, and our identified enemy, of course, the Brahmins. There is a call from Mahesh that we must actually kick them out from all over North America and the European Union. Absolutely, we must do. We do know they've infiltrated our media, our academia, our industry. We've seen it recently in California. Californian politics now actually influenced and indirectly controlled by the Brahmins through their Hindutva forces. So again, totally allied with all our feelings that we need to identify the Hindutva forces and kick them out, James.
Absolutely. And we saw with historical points over the last several elections in Canada where it has been confirmed that there was foreign interference. So again, it's all Western nations, as you say, Angus.
Indeed, and TC has I would say a good summary comment, as TC often does, is talking again about how fascinating insight into the Brahmanical mindset. Again, it's looking at the Brahmins once again. They've penetrated every aspect of Sikh existence, as Dr. Grewal explained. Of course, that we know they've infiltrated the SGPC, the Akali Dal, etc. And India is on track for balkanisation. Absolutely. I think really that sums up everything, is that the way the Brahmins have tried to control Indian society and now targeting the Sikh community is that it ultimately it has only one inevitable conclusion. That is the balkanisation of India, James.
Absolutely. And, we talk about it all the time, so we can go into great detail. But at the same time, if you're interested to know why in further detail, watch the podcast, watch our previous episodes, and you will clearly understand if you don't already.
And in fact, it's interesting that TC's comment also bridges what's going on in India to what's happening in California. Is that the Brahmins, the Brahmanical methodology, their tactics, which they're using in India and now in California, all it's doing is turning people's attention onto what they're up to and their methods, and which means, again, ironically, doing it in the West is just encouraging people to support the whole concept of the balkanisation of India anyway. So again, it's a bit of an own goal. So anyway, Critics Corner, James, returns with a vengeance, I'm happy to say. Killer 3.
Oh, time.
This chap finds it amusing to watch Khalistan is getting laughed at by most Western countries. They prefer trade and business, not some dumb religious crap these loonies believe. Well, I think I'm going to leave it up to Gurpreet Kaur to answer this, because Gurpreet Kaur came back with a cracking response. Basically say, look, whoa, and I'm just going to quickly just sort of flash through this. Look what India's done since 1947. Look economically. $1 was 1 rupee in 1947. Now you get 90 Indian rupees to $1. So in other words, economically, India has just gone downhill. Yeah. The West is exploiting India, not benefiting from it. Do some research. What are you so proud of? India is deep in debt to the World Bank. Delhi is the most polluted city in the whole world. It's the 5th dirtiest on the list. People are stuck in traffic for hours every day. Newly built bridges fall apart even before inauguration. People live in slums. There's a huge poverty gap. 80 crore people are surviving, only relying on government handouts. The world is laughing at India and Indians for no civic sense. Some countries have issued travel advisories for women because it's not safe for women to visit India. And you tell me how many foreigners from developed countries are moving to India instead of the other way around. You should be ashamed of yourself. India has only achieved corruption, hate, divide in the name of religion, etc., poverty, etc. So I think Gurpreet Kaur really just slaps Killer quite directly in the face with that one, James. I think we can leave it at that.
Absolutely, and let's face it, India wouldn't want us to move there for us personally, Angus.
and actually, I'm gonna really sort of wrap this up by saying, actually, despite all that, we are not against India. We love India. We love the Indian people. We're always very specific about who we are targeting, who are the problem in India.
That's right.
And that they're the ones responsible for all that whole paragraph there. It's not ordinary Indians who are responsible for that. It's the ruling elite of India. They're the ones who are the problem. They're the ones that we all must unite, including Hindus, including you, Killer 3. You need to wake up to what's going on, assuming if you are in India yourself. And just one final comment on that is that the West are not laughing at Khalistanis, and this might come as a bit of a shock to you. The West are starting to understand what Khalistan is, what it's about, and of course, Western democracy and the people of Western democracies not laughing and saying, yeah, you know what, this makes sense. We will align and support the whole concept of Khalistan. So unfortunately, Killer, for you, is that the Khalistan might get the last laugh. And then, final set, James. Charanjit Singh. Khalsa Raj was the last to fall to the British. And basically the comment goes on is that the British actually have this debt to the Sikh people, is that actually the British Empire should give back, and the modern day United Kingdom should give Khalistan back to the Sikhs, their own homeland, after taking over and annexing the original Khalsa Raj. If a few British could rule India, why can't the Sikhs, even as a minority, not rule the Khalsa Raj? And then talks about Tara Singh. He was a Hindu originally before he became Sikh. And the accusation here is that Tara Singh originally, during that original discussion negotiation in 1947, is that maybe he himself was actually acting on behalf of the RSS, which is why he deliberately failed the Sikh people. I don't know if that's true or not. Ultimately, though, James, it always comes back to, we do know the Sikhs in 1947 were betrayed, and that the West owes really the Sikh people this debt to say, okay, we will repay, we will compensate you for our failings by giving you your own sovereign territory back, James.
Yeah, absolutely. But the big, of course, diplomatic, twist to that is trying to get India or Pakistan to recognize, Khalistan as it was originally. So that is why people are forced to look at India first, because that was the biggest deception towards the Sikhs and the homeland to be theirs. And that's why they focus on India. Once they have Khalistan there, then maybe they can negotiate and find some middle ground with Pakistan to return that portion as well.
Absolutely right. And Nirmal Singh, one of our regulars from Australia, reminds us, of course, of what Khalistan will stand for. It will treat each other, everybody will be treated equally, with respect, kindness, help each other, irrespective of race, religion or colour. No caste, of course, would reject the caste system. No slavery or apartheid on any human being. And most importantly of all, women will be respected and treated equal to men, which of course they are not certainly in India as it exists today. But I find this most interesting, James, is that Angus, the both of you are well equipped to be Khalistani citizens. Well, I do look forward to the day, hopefully, maybe we might be honoured one day with a Khalistan passport. I certainly hope so, James.
There you go. And hey, we're still waiting for that lunch on the patio in the sunshine, enjoying our Khalistani friends.
Indeed, and waving our Khalistan passport, we look forward to that day. Khalistan Zindabad. The last word goes to Harjinder Singh, which actually is quite appropriate after it was Sukha Singh, I think, signed us off the other day in the namesake of the two Shaheeds who we honoured recently. But anyway, the Khalistan Zindabad goes to Harjinder Singh today. But on that note, as always, we must wrap things up for another day. But thanks so much for all the comments. Do keep them coming in. We've had some great comments, but do keep your interesting comments coming in. Do let us know your thoughts, your perspectives, and anything that we might have missed, any interesting stories or snippets of news that you pick up, or rumours that you might have heard that we can have a dig in, a bit of research about. But that is it for another day. Don't forget, of course, you can message us directly at message@satlogetv.com if you want to talk to us directly. But that's it for another day. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me, and it's a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.